The Business Women Australia podcast show, the podcast that brings together industry leaders to discuss the latest trends, insights and strategies. So sit back and relax, let's get inspired by the amazing women who are shaping the future of professional women in Australia. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So welcome everyone to today's podcast. We're talking about the 5 mistakes to avoid when leading change. And I've got one of my, you should be a well-known guest by now. So for those who haven't met Tracy, we talk a lot about change. And one thing that is constant in the whole world is everyone is always going through some state of change. And how do you cope with it when you're going through business? I've got Tracy here, who is phenomenal. With over 22 years, you're with Sea Change Consulting. This year, Tracy's embarked on a change of her own and is now Tracy Cooper, Change Specialist, and is working with businesses, associations, and leaders on how to best bring in change in the workplace and practical tips, instructions on how to actually get everybody involved and a bit more enthusiastic about change, because some people are a little bit like me and maybe a little bit resistant. Tracy, you help people go through that change. So welcome to our podcast today.
Hello, Leanne. That's a lovely introduction. Nice to be here again. I really enjoy coming on the Business Women Australia podcast and having a chat. I like a chat. And I guess for me, change is something that's around us everywhere. And there's ways to do it well, and there's ways not to do it well. And that's how I help leaders and people work through change. Yeah.
Yeah. And what made you decide to get into change? Because it's quite a unique thing for people, because a lot of people don't think about it until they're in the midst of it and it's going wrong. So What made you decide to get into it?
That's a good question. Leanne, I guess, I mean, I've got an ag science background of all things, and I worked with the science of animals and worked with people, farmers and so forth many, many years ago in advisory roles. And then I moved into I realized it was people, the science of people that I enjoyed. And so I moved into leadership development programs with the state government here in Queensland. And there's a close connection between leadership and leading change. And I guess for me, it was a journey that I just started because I quite enjoy change. And it's something that I feel that I can help people with. And, for me, change is about people. Change is about people and working with people. And it's a wonderful platform for creative thinking and teamwork and innovation. And people make change happen, whether it's an individual change you're doing or in your business. It's going to be the people. It just doesn't happen by itself. So, and I guess I firmly believe people can do amazing things if they're just given the opportunity and the chance. And I think that's the connection to leadership, is that I support leaders and sometimes their teams, and how do we help them reach their potential and make this thing happen, whatever that change is within the organisation. So it's very rewarding to watch people start the journey and then see the growth in people and the change in people, and whatever that change is, when it actually happens, it's rewarding for them, it's rewarding for the business, but it's really nice to be on that journey. So I guess that's why I chose it. It's about people. And it's about seeing people move ahead and change themselves, but really stretch themselves and reach their potential. Yeah.
And I remember when we first started talking, I used to tell you, like, I'm quite a stickler for routine. Like I've always actually said I don't like change, but I've come to realize, especially talking to you, like, I actually do love change. I love seeing people grow, and I like the creativity side and, the ideas that come with change.
Yes.
But there are people who, like I originally was like, that say, I don't like change. What do you think about that?
I hear that too a lot, Leanne, and I think the worst thing you can say to someone who says, I don't like change is, oh, no, it's really great. Change is wonderful, because that's really not what they want to hear. I think people are generally interested in improvements and doing things differently or better, and that can be changed. I think the trouble that people have, and I don't blame them, is they've experienced change being introduced in the past, say if it's organisational change, poorly. So it's how it's been done that actually impacts them, because change brings overwhelm and it can bring fear. And that's where I know that you have to start, is to dealing with that. And that's back to the people side of things, is being in touch with people to help them talk through their fears and why they're feeling overwhelmed, and help them understand what this is about. So I know that people don't, even if it's personal change, I think we're used to what we do. And I guess that's, when we change, it's new, So even, I think the last time I talked to you, I was talking about chosen change, starting this business. And even when you choose a change yourself, it can be hard. And we react, and you want to go back to what you know. So, yeah, that's why I think people say they don't like change if it's on an individual level, but potentially they've had poor experiences of how it's been introduced.
And I mean, and look, we all even get stuck in even something simple like a system update.
Yes.
Sometimes it's like, oh, it's going to change the way I do things, until you realise, oh, well, that update was created to make things easier for you.
Yes, and I think sometimes, Leanne, people forget to communicate that and talk about that as to why we're doing this. What does this change solve? Or how does it get over a hurdle? Or how does it improve things? That's what we need to talk about when we're introducing change to others. It's potentially because it could be unchosen for them. So, yeah, it's about how we actually relate to people to help them to open up to us, to tell us why we don't like change, or they don't like change.
And one of the things you said to me ages ago, I was even talking about small changes in the house. Like, I don't like when certain things are brought into the house that I have to use.
Yes.
I'm like, I don't know why I don't like it. And your response was, well, you weren't consulted.
Yes.
And it was such a simple response, and it was so true. Like, I was frustrated that I didn't have any input. And we all like to have input. We like we like to be validated in what we think, and what we have to work with. So, and that was such a small comment.
Yes.
But it made so much sense. And it actually made me go, well, Leanne, you don't need to be, talk to about a dish rack.
Well, dish racks are important in the house, Leanne, and I think
when I do the dishes.
Yeah, but the point you bring up is whether this is at home or whether it's at work. There are a few key ingredients, and there is a secret sauce, which I'm actually doing that mastermind on in a few weeks' time here on Business Women Australia and Women Australia. And I think I can share that with people. I can tell you, and so what you've just talked about, consultation is a part of that sauce. So that's what, at home or at work or with your kids, with your community group, when we tell, which I'll get into because that's one of the mistakes, it doesn't actually often go that well. So,
which is going to lead me into what we're here for. And, there are a few common mistakes that people do make when it comes to initiating and leading change. So what do you reckon, what would be your first one, that mistake that people make when they're leading change?
Yeah. And I guess this one is what we see at the start, what I see at the start of a change is the mistake is diving into action too quickly. So I'm talking here about in an organisational sense. So a leader potentially has been thinking about this change for some time before they've announced it to everybody else, and they want to get moving, and whether that's through passion or pressure, we have to make this thing happen. The temptation is just that, right, let's just start doing stuff. And the planning can be limited. The communication can be limited. And that results in confusion, and people aren't aligned, and people don't see the benefits. People aren't consulted, like your example, and it brings conflict. So that's what I say to people is just slow up at the front. Just don't dive into action. Stand back and think about this for yourself, but also include your leaders in this process to join you in this journey and start getting clear on why are we doing this? Why are we doing this now, not next year? Or so what's the sense of urgency? Which is, what if we don't do it? And, you know, I just said it before, what is this change solving? Is there a challenge it's overcoming? You know, sometimes changes aren't because everything's a problem, but often, you used the phrase before, we want to do things better or streamline things or save time. So getting that clear amongst all of you in the leadership group is important, but that helps you then be able to communicate. Because if we just start doing the change and start whatever it is, people are going, whoa, I don't get it. I don't understand. So the action is just to resist that temptation to dive into action. It's to start thinking and planning to reduce.
And I think, you know, someone like myself, that is, I know something that I always need to be mindful of, because it's not so much that I want to act so fast, but I'm a bit of an excitable person. So if I see something that's going to be really good, I get a bit overexcited and I want to do it now and let's just run with it. And I'm a bit of a bull out of the gate like that.
Yes, so you've hit on a great point, and that's great self-awareness, Leanne. I think this is part of it too, that as leaders, you know, sometimes the changes that they have to do is not their choice. It might be forced on them through regulation or government policy or through their board or whatever it is. But often if it's their idea, they're excited about it. And, you know, that old phrase, a bull at a gate, and they start to try and convince people, oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be really, really good. And this is why. And people aren't there yet. They're thinking of, oh, my God, am I going to lose my job? What does this mean? Have I got to move desks? Do I have to do things differently? So it's about tapping into that first. But it's a really good point. That's why I said before, it can come from passion or pressure. The passion to make this happen sometimes helps us. Probably not helps. We overlook things to slow down and get some of this clear in the beginning. So, yeah.
And moving on with that, you know, because, you know, obviously the leaders usually initiate change. Rarely it will come from someone, you know, bringing up a good idea and starting it, but the leaders will have to initiate it. Do you think they can actually force people to change?
No. Quick answer, no. You can try, but that is mistake number 2, thinking that you can force people to change. I mean, think about an example where you've been forced to do something and made do something. And it actually, you know, there is resistance. There is, because force creates tension and because there's not a lot of clarity around you. I'm just telling you. So I do think some leaders make the mistake in this one of thinking, because I am the leader and I'm saying so, people should follow me. And that is not the case. People don't follow you because you say so. People follow you because they choose to. And they can see reason in what you're doing and trust that you will help them along the way. So I think some people use force because it's a quick strategy. We've got to hurry up and get this done, but it will backfire. And like I said, I can only encourage leaders to think about the last time you were forced to do something, and it doesn't feel great. I mean, you were talking before about, I have a voice. I want to be heard, and, you know, I want to be validated in what I think. So the key here, which is another piece of the secret sauce, I'm letting out that mastermind session, Leanne, but another piece of it is helping people around you, the people who have to do the change, choose it. You know, so it's like, and that, yes, takes a bit more time. And I'll leave it to the mastermind to tell you how to do that, but it's the session, but it's about choice. So when people choose it, they get on the bus. They say, okay, all right, I can see why, I can see the benefits. I'm getting on the bus. Life is so much easier for everybody. Time is saved, energy is saved. So that should be the strategy. That's part of the secret sauce, is don't force, ask people to choose it. So that's number 2.
And I think, people being comfortable to ask the questions as well, allowing people that grace to, well, if they're going to be forced, they've got to be able to know what they're being forced into in a way. So giving them grace to ask questions, to be able to answer on their level.
Yes, and you've brought up a good point, because sometimes there are things in life that just have to happen. And, we can go back to the pandemic. That's an example. It was forced lockdowns, forced lots of different changes to what we did. And we didn't have I guess for me, consultation, you brought it up before, is about asking people their thoughts. It's not about, consultation doesn't mean because you ask me, I will convince you to not make this change happen. It's consultation about, it is happening, but how do we do this? How do we do this together? So I think it's something to consider, that yes, there will always be things, and sometimes leaders have that hard job of, I didn't choose this either, and they got to make it look like they have. So it's about, how do we just remove that thinking of, I'll tell you to do it. It's about how we have to do this for these reasons. How do we do this together? What's the best way we can do this?
Which I think this actually might lead into the next one.
I think it does.
I think, how people have faith, and if you're not building that faith, they're going to lose that trust in you. Yes.
So mistake number 3 is failing to build trust. So as a leader, generally speaking, I see that's a big part of your job, is to help people become the best version of themselves and do the great work for them, but also for the business. And they will choose to follow you when they trust you. And when changes come along, the trust can be stretched a little bit. It's like, oh, really? Why are we doing this, or why? So it's around trust of you as the leader. You might have some okay levels, but it's also failing to build trust around the change itself, what this means. So I guess for me, trust is important in all our relationships, and it's so important in times of change, because it will help, my point before, it will help and go a long way to helping people choose it, if they trust you as a leader and the change itself.
And I know a great woman who once said, trust, what is it? Trust happens, no?
Change
happens at the speed of trust.
Speed of trust, yes. She did say that.
I should know that off by heart by now. I actually use it frequently, and I might just pass it off as my own.
You might, yes. So, yes, it's when there's trust, it goes a long way in helping people with that choice and deciding to come with you. So failing to build trust is a mistake that I see leaders make. Like I said, not just in them as the leader, but in trust what this change is about and what we're doing.
No, I remember, this is showing my age a little bit, working a few years ago, we'll call it, and we had a systems changeover.
Yeah.
Because we were no longer using floppy disks at the end of the day.
Showing your age, Leanne. And I'm pleased you said that slowly. Yes. Yeah.
So we did have to initiate the change, and I love a new system. I love learning the technical stuff. So it was my jam. But the thing is that we had a lot of people who had resistance, because, we use floppy disks all the time, and people couldn't understand where our information was being stored if we weren't doing that. And I was really lucky that, even though I wasn't a leader in the team at the time, because I understood the transition, I was actually able to build that trust with other people to bring that initiation on board.
Yes.
But
well done. And I think
it was really confusing.
Yeah, and you've hit on a good point, that sometimes people may not trust the new way because they really don't understand. What does that mean? I don't get how that will work. And you were obviously a great bridge to helping that happen. So yeah, well done. Well done.
And now the next generation doesn't even know what a floppy disk is.
That's right.
Anyway,
They don't. All right.
number four.
Number four mistake, and this is, I mean, they're all important, but this is probably one of the biggies, and I see it regularly, is failing to lead the way. So often a change is announced in an organisation, and it can be announced poorly. So it could be sent out on an email or mentioned at a town hall meeting or team meetings or so forth. And I've actually had leaders say to me, well, I told them what it was and this is how it's happening. And then they call me and go, things aren't working. They have to be, as an individual leader, active and visible and be seen to be a part of the journey. Sitting in their office or staying away and getting others to do the change isn't a great strategy. And you touched on something before which made me think about, often there are change initiators. Now, whether that's the CEO or the leadership team and or the board or the government or someone like that, but someone initiates this change. And it's what they want out of this change is different for the recipient of the change, which could be the employees, it could be the customer. So we need to think at it from all levels. What the staff or the employees want to see from this is different to what the board wants. So we actually have to be there as leaders and deal with all stakeholders on all different levels. So it's a big job. And I think for me, it's also about building your coalition of, if that's a big word, for your group of leaders around you. So if you're the CEO, it's your senior leaders that need to come on board with you and need to be on that journey. So individually, each of those leaders need to be supporting their teams, but collectively, the leadership team needs to be working together. I just posted about this yesterday on LinkedIn, that you will have, if your leadership team are not aligned around what this change is and why we're doing it, and we're not, I encourage diversity of thinking, but if, you can do a little activity and ask 5 of your team, what is this change? And you could potentially get 5 different answers. So it's about having conversations in your leadership team to come together and talk about what this means, why, and some of those questions, what problem is this solving? And another key point I've seen is for other senior leaders to, what's their role in this? Some say if it's a systems change, they'll say, oh, that's IT. It's an organisational decision. So it's about their role. So individually as a leader, it's important you've got to lead the way with each of your teams, but collectively as a leadership team, you need to do this because the rest of the organisation will spot the misalignment and potentially the dysfunction if you've got conflict, and that will help them lose faith in the leadership team and in the change itself. So leading the way is so, so important. And with that last part comes the communication, the constant communication throughout the journey. So that's what leaders should be doing, being active and visible, building a group of leaders, and also communicating. I call it the ABC, active, building, and C is communicating. Yeah. So leading the way.
Seeing leaders who actively engage in change in a positive light. So, because I've come from somewhere where we've had to change a board over from being incorporated to an unincorporated board, and there was resistance. And the biggest resistance we had was from the board members who'd been there 20 years, and they didn't want to change it because this is how we always did things.
Yes.
So, and it causes a lot of unrest.
Yeah.
If people aren't willing to learn and engage, because nobody else wants to if the leaders don't want to.
Yes. And, listening to that example, Leanne, I can understand and appreciate, and that's what I think we need to do in changing times. They're not bad people, those ones that were there for 20 years. They've built that to where it is. That is what they know. And so that's where the fear comes in, or they feel threatened because this is my world is now not what I thought it was. So as leaders, if they have people in their team or other board members, it's to treat those people respectfully and try and understand them and uncover what their resistance is about and listen to them. And that will help. with that process. Yeah, that's a good
And that
example.
was the thing. We actually asked them we did change it over.
Yeah.
And we actually asked them to stay on the board because, with 20 years of experience, we would be amiss to say, well, this is the new way.
Yes.
This is the only way it's done. To lean on that experience too was for us invoking the change was really valuable.
Oh, that's very wise. Yes, because they have so much experience and so much knowledge that they can offer. We just do it in a different way now. But that's big for them. That's big for them. Yeah.
So last one. What do you
Number
think?
5. Yeah, number 5.
Number 5 mistake.
Yeah, well, this is, people who might hear me talking about this, I bang on about it a bit, but not pausing regularly and reviewing where we're at. I've played a lot of sport in my time, and I often say to leadership teams, you don't just have half time because you puffed and you need some oranges. What else happens at half time? Or quarter time, depending on what sport you're playing, or after the game. It's actually reflecting on the run, or you've actually physically stopped, but you're catching your breath. That's one thing. But you're also reflecting on what's happened. So I like to use that example as the same thing with change. Change is a hard journey, and there's a lot going on, and there's different things coming from left field, right field, goalposts get shifted for whatever reasons, and it can be mentally and physically draining. So regular pausing to stop and catch your breath, but also to talk to each other about, okay, what's happened here? Let's list out what's happened. What's gone well, because often we can focus on what's not going well, but what's gone well? Where are our wins? I was coaching someone the other day, and she came up with it herself. She said, I've got some wins. And I said, great, let's start with the wins, because we can often go to what's not working. So what's the wins we've had? What's not going well? So, and based on all of that, what are we learning? Because change is a wonderful ground for learning. And it's a journey, so we can learn through the experience. So if we take that leadership and learning connection to change, we go, okay, we didn't do that so well, and we've learnt that whatever we've learnt. So the plan going on from there is to do this. So if you don't stop yourself and do that individually, but as a team and talk, that's going to encourage confusion, disengagement and frustration, whereas it can turn it on its head and be very motivating, because we're listening to all of us. What have we all got to put into this? So how, as we leave this, what do we do next? So it doesn't have to take forever. You can have a 45-minute meeting and make some amazing learnings or realizations and turn that into the next steps. And that can save you so much time and so much energy moving forward. So yeah, not pausing is a big mistake. Big mistake.
And I think also by allowing others to review, once again, gives them that voice.
Very much so. And that's the big part of change is leaders, don't carry this all yourself. Don't try and have all the answers and come up with all the new ideas. That's why you have a team, to help you think, but also for them to go and do some of the work. But you don't have to do this all yourself, and that's the benefit of utilizing the wisdom and the experience in your team. And it's time well spent to stop and have half time, or stop, and even if you took an hour and a half, stop acting or getting into action, and you could actually save some time. So make it a regular habit. Make it monthly. Depending on the change, you could do it fortnightly, but it's this regular check-in and helping people. This is where they build their potential, Leanne, is to have their voice and come up with something, and then they build their confidence and they go, this is all right, I can do this. Change is not too bad. So that's where the connection then is also to confidence and helping people reach their potential for the good of the organisation, but the change itself. Yeah. So that's the 5.
That's the 5. So a quick recap, because I do have it in my notes that I've been taking. So one, you've said diving into action too quickly.
Yes.
Number 2, thinking that as a leader you can force people to change.
Yes.
3, failing to build trust.
Yes.
Failing to lead the way. And finally, not pausing regularly and reviewing progress.
Yeah.
So why do you think leaders do make these mistakes?
They're human. Leaders are human, and we all make mistakes. And I think the important part is that we can put our hand up and say, I didn't do that very well, and I've learnt this, and move on. But I think, Leanne, it probably comes back to my point about leaders have a lot to do, and they have a lot to achieve. They've got things that they need to make happen, and change can be hard and it can be overwhelming. And leading change is even harder. So back to that point about, if it's passion or it's pressure, sometimes we don't think very well on our feet. And that's why some of the mistakes can happen. And we might revert back to what we know, which is just doing. Put your head down and do. Whereas if leaders can think about the leading change as a people game, is how do I help my team? How do I get them thinking? How do I build their abilities and confidence? I also think it's about potentially too, people may not have led change much before. They're in a position to, and it's murky, it's messy. There's not a cookie cutter approach to how you cook the cake. There's some key ingredients, but it is a bit of trial and error sometimes, and that's why I think they do make mistakes, is because they're human, because they're under pressure. They want to maybe just get this done, or they just aren't sure which way to go.
Yeah, and that is something, because working with a lot of business women, and we've seen it where people have been caught in the cycle of working the business rather than running the business for it to grow, and to understand sometimes to get off that wheel and review is, as much as people go, oh, I don't have the time, and it's like, well, you kind of need it. It'll give you more time.
Yes.
Taking that balcony view can help a lot.
And I think a lot of it too, Leanne, is as a leader, as a change leader, is thinking about what your role is. What am I here to do? I've had the idea potentially, or I have to deliver the news. But again, if you think about it in sport, the coach doesn't play the game. The coach directs, the coach guides, the coach helps some of the players when they're feeling a bit low. The coach helps with the key ingredients and the game plan, but they don't play the game. And getting your hands dirty and doing can help sometimes to walk the floor, but it's about how do I marshal the team so we can together make this happen. That's what leaders need to think about. Probably going back to mistake 4 is leading the way. That's your role, I see, in changing times. Yeah.
So how do you coach leaders when they've got how do you help them lead with impact?
Well, I guess I help them not make those 5 mistakes. I think
that's a good start.
Yeah, I work with people to, and I've probably alluded to it there, as leaders, it's not about everybody else doing the changing. A big part of how I support leaders and coach them through and advise them in some of the programs I do is around working with them, leading themselves, leading their teams, and then leading the change. So there's a big part, they're playing a big part in this. So being a learner, being self-reflective and so forth. So because change is a challenge, I like working with those leaders who go, I just need some help, someone to walk with me and guide me. I was thinking about this the other day. A number of years ago, I did a holiday in Spain, and we had a tour guide called Monica. And she was great, because what she did is, when you're in a foreign place, like change can be, you can't speak the language, although I tried a couple of times, but she actually pointed us in the right direction. She showed us where some things were that we would never have known. She actually guided us to, no, don't go there, go here. And it saved us time and energy, but it also helped me narrow in on the things that I wanted to do. So she was a great example for me about, she didn't do all the planning for us, and she didn't tell us everything to do. She actually just guided and responded to our needs. And I think that's how I like to see myself, as a change guide. I stand beside leaders and I walk with them, and I guide them. I'm there to listen and support, but I'm also there to, I take an approach of, particularly in my change advisory work that I do, is I say, well, these are the key ingredients. This is what we need to do first. this is what we need to do next, then we need to do this. And I don't do the change for them. I'm not a change management consultant that goes into the organization. I'm building their capability by standing beside them and guiding them. So they go away and they do those things, but I'm just giving them, like my guide, Monica, I'm giving them where to go next. And I also help them learn from their experience. I challenge them and say, well, how did that go? Did it work? Didn't it work? What did you learn? So do we need to adjust things? Yeah, so I like standing beside and walking with and supporting leaders that way. Yeah.
And just because I can, we're going to be discussing a bit of this in the mastermind.
Yes,
where you're going to be talking about the secret sauce of leading organizational change in the not-for-profit sector. Yes. Not to say people who are in the for-profit sector can't join, but
of course, yes, I'm doing quite a bit of work in the not-for-profit sector currently, and there are some unique challenges in that sector, so such as workforce and government regulation and different things. And some of the changes that leaders in those organisations are faced with is not a choice that they're making. So it's harder to then go to their teams and do it. So yes, I'll be talking about. I've touched on a couple of things here. What I'll be talking about, but it goes back to this key ingredients. You know, we can bake a cake, but we've got to have the key ingredients. How you do that, it depends on different changes, but I can lead and show the way with those ingredients and get people going and reduce some of that overwhelm and as leaders have, and help them lead with confidence. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait. So we'll be talking again on the 14th of June, which will be inviting everyone to join us.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you again so much for your time today. Always love having our chin wags.
Yes, they're always a good chat, Leanne. Thank you for having me.
Sorry?
Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime. And, you know, I even managed to stay on topic because usually we kind of go left of centre a little bit.
Yes, we can do that, but that's good. Thank you for the opportunity, and it's been a great conversation and allowing me to share some of these mistakes that I've seen people make. I just want to help people to be able to not be frightened of change. I want people to be able to thrive in change because I believe in change.
And like I said, it's something that we can't really escape. So best to know how to get through it.
That's right. That's right. Okay, thank you, Leanne.
Listening, and please tune in on all good podcasting stations like Apple and Spotify. And I'm sure we'll have another chat with Tracy again soon. Bye.
Thanks, Leanne. Bye-bye.